First of all, I would like to thank Dr. P.K. Pandey sir for inviting me to be in this symposium, and I'm extremely glad to be here, especially to share this virtual meeting with great stalwarts in strabismus like Professor Subhash Dadye sir, Pradeep Sharma sir, V.K. Pandey sir, Dr. Shreya, Dr. Jitendra, and all others, as Dr. Pradeep Sharma sir says, squintellectuals. Yeah. Now I will be sharing my experience with Brown syndrome. Yeah. Brown syndrome comes under those congenital cranial dysinnervation syndrome. It has got a typical signs, especially the deficient elevation in adduction with normal elevation in abduction, or near normal elevation in the primary position, which is always associated with a restricted force duction. There may be a superior oblique overaction, V pattern divergence, and associated anomalous head posture, hypertropia in primary position, and downshoots. These are rare signs. And Brown syndrome could be either congenital or acquired. When we talk about congenital Brown syndrome, actually it is more or less asymptomatic, except probably a little bit of abnormal head posture and motility issues, whereas acquired is sudden onset, diplopia will be there, tenderness over the trochlea, and etiology could be inflammatory, traumatic, maybe due to bursitis, iatrogenic, maybe due to superior oblique tuck or some sinus surgeries, or it could be cysticercosis. So in acquired Browns, always you should be doing an imaging. This is a child who presented to us with a sudden onset of head posture. You can see the chin up position, and the patient had history of rheumatoid arthritis, and on examination, typical motility problem of defective elevation in the adducted position. So imaging was done, and there was a thickening of the superior oblique region. There was no cyst there, and since the child was already diagnosed as rheumatoid arthritis, we thought it is also along with that, and treated with systemic anti-inflammatory agents, paratrochlear steroid injection, and the patient fully recovered in 1 month's time. So there is a full recovery of acquired Browns. Some people say that even after recovery, there will be residual deviation, but in my case, there is no residual deviation, there is a full recovery. And coming to congenital Browns, there are the dilemmas. The most important dilemma is whether we have to do the surgery or not. It is well known that spontaneous resolution of congenital Brown is possible. And again, another factor is that surgical success rate is not that very good. These are two things which we have to keep in mind, so that you don't do surgery in all cases. There is some absolute indication for surgery, otherwise we don't do surgery in mild cases of Browns. Absolute indications are those severe cases of Browns plus with unacceptable head tilt or chin elevation, primary position hypertropia, downshoot in adduction, or threat to binocularity. See, this child has got a primary position hypertropia. Patient presents with a head tilt, chin elevated position, and there is a downshoot. So this is a severe Brown syndrome or Browns plus. This has to be operated. And dilemma 2 is what surgery is to be done. There are different procedures, and it's always a dilemma to select. I have listed the different types of surgeries in the order of success rate and the order of popularity. Nowadays, most surgeons have resorted to chicken suture in Brown syndrome. Second option is the superior oblique tendon spacer with silicone band. Some people are very fond of doing superior oblique tendon lengthening. Actually, these three procedures, it's a personal choice between different surgeons. Other procedures like tendon recession, tenectomy, tenotomy, etc., better has got very bad results like superior oblique palsies and other altered movements, and hence it's seldom done nowadays. The superior oblique chicken suture surgery and even the spacer surgery, both of them are controlled surgery, and these have got the best success rate. Both these procedures are reversible in the early stages. and can be repeated in the early stages, but not very late. If you are doing it after many months, because of adhesions and fibrosis, it will be difficult to do resurgeries. But in the early stages, it's always you can go back and do surgery. And iatrogenic superior oblique palsy is rare in spacer surgery, but it is only rare, but it still can occur. And mild superior oblique palsies are reported even in spacer surgeries, like in this article published in JAPOS. See, I'll show a small video of her.
You can just put slideshow, then only it will play.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so thank you for reminding me. Superior oblique chicken suture for Browns. Before doing surgery, we have to do an exaggerated force reduction test and see whether there is a restriction in elevation. See, you can see that in the nasal side, it is difficult to move the globe in upwards. So there is a force reduction is positive. Once the force reduction is positive, you can go ahead with the superior oblique surgery. You open up the superior oblique by conjunctival incision 8 millimeters behind the limbus, which is extended laterally. And after the tenons also is exposed, the tenons is incised, and then you go for the superior rectus muscle. Once the superior rectus is exposed and is on the muscle hook, I always put a stay suture under the superior rectus. A stay suture is placed under the superior rectus, and superior rectus can be slightly pulled laterally so that the region of the superior oblique is better visualized. Under direct visualization, the superior oblique muscle has to be hooked. You can see that the superior oblique tendon is too tight, and I am putting two muscle hooks on the proximal and distal part of the tendon, and I am using a 5-0 Mercilin non-absorbable suture. First is passed at the distal end of the tendon. First a partial thickness bite, and then a full thickness bite is taken, so that the entire width of the superior oblique is in the suture. And once you pass the suture on the proximal part, a small loop has to be made, and the length of the loop can be adjusted. It may be anything from 8 to 10 millimeters or less, and the length of the loop has to be titrated depending on looking at the fundus torsion and looking at the force reduction test after the completion of the surgery. And so I have taken a loop and then taken the sutures on the proximal part of the tendon. And after putting these sutures, I'm adjusting the length of the loop as much as I want. I have taken about 10 millimeters of the loop, and the distance between the two sutures is about 5 millimeters. You can do it at 2 millimeters, but then if you do it at 2 millimeters, the chance of sutures cutting through is very high. So 5 millimeters, 4 to 5 millimeters space is very good. After passing the sutures like this and making the loop, the muscle has to be cut in the middle. The tendon has to be cut in the middle. And after cutting the tendon, you have to allow the tendon to retract. Here I'm again fixing the loops. Any non-absorbable suture can be used. It's better to have a double-armed cutting needle. This surgery is easier than the spacer technique, and we are not introducing any foreign body in the superior rectus region, so that postoperatively superior rectus is free to move. There will not be any additions with the superior rectus. So in my opinion, this is a superior surgery than the spacer. Spacer practically, theoretically, spacer also is good. Spacer means silicon band. This also is a spacer, suture spacer. See, the tenotomy is done. It's a full tenotomy, and now we are allowing the muscles to retract. At this point, we have to come back and do the force reduction test. Make sure that the force reduction is possible. You should be able to move the globe freely, superiorly in the nasal side. Then only the surgery will be successful. See the force duction. It's easy to move the globe superiorly. So we are expecting a good result. The advantage of chicken suture is that it is reversible, technically easier, intraoperative adjustment can be done. And this is the diagrammatic representation of spacer, where you use a silicon band, a piece of 240 retinal band, which is kept between the two curtains of the superior oblique. This is the surgical picture. This is the silicon band sutured between the two curtains of the superior oblique. This is a little more difficult than the chicken suture. And the length of this band can vary from 4 to 8 millimeters. See, this is one child with a Brown syndrome, right Brown. This is the postoperative picture. These pictures look very beautiful. This was taken 18 months later, but no, this spacer technique was done. Immediate postoperative result was very good, but gradually the patient developed superior oblique paralysis, and I had to do inferior oblique recession in the same eye and inferior rectus recession of the opposite eye, maybe some 3 years later in this child. And I'll come to the split tendon lengthening procedure.
Ma'am, we'd like you to wind up.
Yeah, I'll split tendon lengthening is again you split the tendon between the two muscle hooks or clamps and suture it together. And the advantage of split tendon is that it is easier, but the most difficult part of this is that you have to work with the very small tendon, and so it is easy to cut off. Superior oblique tenectomy and tenotomy, I won't advise at all. It will produce superior oblique palsy. So I would conclude saying that all dilemmas are closed. Surgery is done only if it is severe Browns, and preferred surgery is either chicken suture, silicon band, or split tendon. And then between these three, it is individual choice. Thank you very much for patient hearing.